here for you next week. I was late on getting it to Miss Jane, but we're going to go ahead and do the first lesson. We're going to do the whole thing. We're going to start the first lesson on the book of Genesis today, okay? And we're going to go through Genesis and Exodus, and the lesson or the book on Exodus goes into Deuteronomy as well. So that's kind of where we'll be going throughout the summer and into the fall. And we're going to start today, Genesis chapter 1, okay? And I know we've talked quite a bit about creation, and we hear a lot about it, and all those sorts of things. But in order for us to get a really good understanding of what happens in the book of Exodus and kind of where we're at as far as biblical history, I wanted us to start again in the book of Genesis to kind of go through it and to kind of get a pretty good foundation again, just as a reminder of some stuff, hopefully teach you a few things that maybe you didn't know, and maybe you did know and just simply forgot about, or a lot of times I think we as Christians especially take, I don't want to say take advantage, but kind of just look over the fact that God did in fact create what we see here in this world. He did it in 6 days, and He spoke it in a lot, and we know that it's constantly under attack with all the other type of what they call scientific discoveries and scientific sayings. And we're going to look at some of those today, and we'll talk a little bit about the Big Bang Theory and the gap theory and all that kind of stuff. We're going to kind of get into all of that today. We're going to just do the 6 days of creation today, okay? And we may even not even get to all 6 of them. We're going to start with the days of creation. The first lesson that we have is I'll have a PowerPoint for you next week, jumps into chapter 2 as well, and talks about some of the stuff that happens in chapter 2, of course, the fall of man and Adam and Eve and all that kind of thing. But we're going to look specifically today at the days of creation. Honestly, if I really wanted to, I could probably take a Sunday and do a day of creation per. But I don't want to completely bore you with all the information that I guess could give you about things, because again, we talked quite a bit about this. But as we kind of get started here, what I want you to kind of do is think back in your life to the very first memory that you can remember. Okay, and I know that I try to think back as I was going through this. I don't remember much about being 3 years old. I remember being 4 years old because I remember having a conversation with Mom on our old brown floral couch that we used to have, looking at the sliding glass window out over before we even had the deck on that we have now at Mom and Dad's house, and having a conversation about sin and about not wanting to go to hell and all that stuff. And I remember that vividly. Don't remember what day it was, but I remember it was in the fall time. But I remember vividly having the conversation, and I had an old wordless book bracelet that we had made in Cubby's that I had, and that's what we went through. And Mom kind of explained some stuff to me, and then was saved later on that evening. Vividly, again, don't remember the day. Don't remember what day it was because I probably didn't understand what days were at that point. Do remember being in the fall time though, because it's during the warnings. So I have that memory now. Before that, I don't remember a whole lot. And I would imagine probably some of you all, if you really try to think back to your very first memory, kind of hard to do, but you don't remember a whole lot of stuff, like as Pippa's age, obviously she's not going to remember a whole lot as far as she gets older, what she is now. As far as the day-to-day stuff, there'll be some big moments, I guess, she may be able to look back on. But it's... we got pictures and stuff we can look at to kind of help us jog our memory on some of the stuff that kind of happened. And so the earliest memory that you can possibly think back of. And then with that, let's go a step further. And what do you remember about the day that you were born? Nothing, right? You don't remember that. So with you not being able to remember the day that you were born, and really not even remembering the first couple of years of your life very much, maybe a few little things. Let's think a little farther. When did God first know who you were? right? God's always known you, right? In eternity past, God has always known everything about each and every one of us because we're all a part of this eternal plan. Maybe a small part of it, but nonetheless, God had a plan for us and has a plan for us and had that plan even before the creation of the world. Okay, that's hard for us to kind of comprehend. And it's actually mind-boggling to think that God's plan for eternity past incorporated each and every one of us. Now, the lesson that we're going to go through today focuses on the 7 days of God's plan, the first 7 days. And we'll do it as far as what our mind can comprehend. And we're going to look at a couple of truths and a couple of things as God began to create this plan, right? The plan that we are a part of. Okay, we are. Each and every one of us are a part of this eternal plan. The plan that God has for each and every one of us, it started with creation day as God was starting the processes of gravity and physics and photosynthesis and all the stuff that we have today. As God was starting all of those things, He had each and every one of us in mind too, because we're part of that plan. And it's hard for us to grasp, but it's really, really cool to think that the God of the universe, the God that created the process that starts these plants budding every year about this time, He didn't just create the plants, right? He created the process of them going dormant and then producing the flowers and then producing the leaves and all the stuff that goes with it. He had us in mind, a part of that plan as well. Now, let's shift gears for a second. When you have some company coming over, and you know somebody's going to come, maybe some family's coming in and spending some time, or maybe you're going to keep somebody for the night or whatever it is, how long do you take to prepare or get your house ready? What type of things do you do to get ready to have company or to have people come into your house? Now, Haley and Pip were running a little bit late this morning. I'll tell this story on Haley because she's not in here right now. But Haley is a fanatical cleaner. Okay, she's fanatical with it. As a matter of fact, Mom brings the boys over a couple days a week and keeps Pip and the boys at our house, and we spend the night before cleaning the entire house. Now, I don't think the house needs cleaned that much, but she's cleaning it, so that's fine. So Haley has a lot of things that she does to get ready for the boys and Pip to come over just to essentially destroy the house, right? That's what they do. They come in, they play, and they have a good time, and it's just mass chaos when I get up there, and I enjoy it, and I love it, but then when they leave, then we clean the house back up. That's what she likes to do. And I'm sure each of you all have a certain set of things that you do when you know that you're going to have company. Scrub the floors, vacuum, whatever it is. Now, God, infinite intelligence, infinite power, infinite ability, God took 6 full days to prepare the universe for us. Okay, on the 6th day, He hosted this open house, right? He hosted some company for the first man and the first woman. How thrilled and probably, we'll say excited, we'll put it in our terms, how excited he must have been to introduce Adam and Eve to the world and the universe that He had created. I'm sure he was just tickled to death. I bet in God's mind, He couldn't wait till day 6, right? Because He knew what He was creating, and He couldn't wait to show Adam and Eve what He had done. So we're going to look back at that first week, and next week I'll have some pictures for you as we kind of go back through this. But what I want us to focus on as we look at these days of creation, I'm going to try to give you a lot of information. I'm going to try to give you a lot of pertinent information that I think is important for us, and a lot of repeat information that you've heard before. But I want us to focus on God's revelation of Himself in the way in which He prepared the earth and then interacted with man because of it. Because we got to think, the creation that God gave us was His way of showing us some of His power, right? It's His way of showing us some of the things that He's able to do, and He wants us to enjoy it. All right, so we're going to focus on the revelation of Himself through His creation. And historically, this has been known in theology as a general revelation. Okay, so if you'll keep your finger there in Genesis, let's go over to Romans real quick and go to chapter 1. And look at verse 20. And it says, "For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse." So creation as we see it, and this is, it's really neat that we're talking about creation in the springtime because we can actually see this stuff happening. This is the revelation of God, the invisible things of himself from the creation that he's given us. That's how he has, in some ways, revealed himself to us. Okay? The general revelation of himself. Now, whereas God's revelation of himself in Scripture is known as a special revelation. Okay? Go over to 2 Timothy with me, chapter 3. Probably can quote this one, but we'll go look at it. 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 16. "All Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness." So this special revelation of God that we have in our hands that we can read and study, and the reason we come to church and do these things, right, and have Awanas and all the stuff that we do, is we can see the special revelation of what God has given us in His Scriptures. Creation is the general revelation of God's character, of who He is, okay, what He's able to do. Special revelation we have in Scriptures. It is important that we understand and maintain this distinction of general revelation in creation, special revelation in Scripture, in a culture that is becoming increasingly biblical illiterate. Okay? It's becoming increasingly biblical illiterate. Don't believe me? Watch any of the news or read anything that you see, okay, on the internet or anything as far as this normal headline stuff. We as a society are becoming less and less understanding of what the Scriptures are and what are in the Scriptures for us. Also, there are a whole bunch of doctrinal errors, okay, foundational stuff that we build our faith on. There are a whole bunch of errors in both the charismatic movement, in the scientific community a lot of times. There's all kinds of things that the Bible has been warped into that are doctrinally not correct. They're incorrect, and they're leading people astray. Also, there is a careless movement of just using terminology and songs and in everyday speech that pull us farther away from a proper understanding of the very basics of God's revelations to us. Okay, and again, I've told you all this before. One of the reasons I think God has called me to teach, because I try to fight the fight every semester on evolution and creation. Because at the core of what we believe, how the earth got here, right? That is a foundational belief of life. We all have an innate ability in us. We have a desire in us of believing that something is higher than ourselves. God has created that in us. Every society, going back to the very, very beginning of mankind, has had a desire to serve something greater than themselves or figure out something greater than themselves. If we do not teach and we do not believe that God created us and the earth in the way that He said it did, we believe something else. If the foundation cracks, what happens? The whole thing falls down. Okay, so at the foundational level, it's important for us to understand and believe that what God said He did is exactly what He did. Okay, and it's always under attack, and it's getting farther and farther away from the truth that is in the Scriptures. All right. So that's why I think it's incredibly important, probably one of the most important things, is to understand how we got here. Okay, that starts, if we believe in God and that He brought us here, then we have a desire to understand God and why He put us here. Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to be looking at now. So the first point of this, as we're going to see in the first couple of verses here of chapter 1, is that God, okay, deserves our worship. because of what He's created for us. God deserves our worship because of what He created for us. Now, we have an awesome, a wonderful, a great opportunity that we have, that we know the guy that created all the stuff we have to enjoy. Okay? We know Him, and we can have the opportunity to know Him on a very intimate level, knowing the guy that created all this stuff. Okay? It's an awesome opportunity for us. That brings understanding of the past and helps give meaning and understanding in order to life in the present, and then how we live going into the future. Now, the person who does not believe in God as the Creator, but trust in mysterious, unknowable forces for the source of all things, they don't have the same certainty that we do as people who believe in God as being the Creator. Okay? And we'll get more to that here in just a second. I'll double down and hit on that in just a second. Okay? So the person who has no certainty of how things got here has no stability in the present, and therefore has no expectancy going into the future. Okay, are you with me? The fact that we believe in God gives us certainty for now and certainty going into the future. If I'm not sure, if I think I know, but I'm not sure on how stuff got here, then I'm not sure about the present, and I'm difficult times now, and the difficult times we know that are coming in the future, because God is still in control of it. If He was in control of it at the beginning of things, then He's going to be in control of it in the future as well. All right, so we see the great importance here of understanding and believing that God created everything that we have around us, because it gives us a stability moving forward in life. Now, Genesis 1 through 5. Let's read those. And as we're reading through these verses, I want you to ask yourself, what does God expect us to believe about His work of creation? What does God expect us, as the readers of the book of Genesis, to believe about His works of creation? Genesis 1 and verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness, and called the light day, and the darkness He called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. What does God expect us to believe about His work of creation?
It came from nothing.
It came from nothing. I'll show something over here. It was His hand that created it. From a literal standpoint of reading those 5 verses, what does God want us to believe? What?
He's powerful.
He's powerful. What else? If I come over to Pastor Rob and I look at him and say, "This shirt is great," I expect him to believe that this shirt is great. Right? I don't expect him to think that my shirt is red, though it's obviously very plainly gray. Pretty simple conversation we had. And those first 5 verses, it's a very simple conversation that Moses is writing down that God has for us. He says what? Very plainly, in the beginning. So, at the very beginning, at the very first, what did God do? Created it. Right? God, in reading those 5 verses, He wants us to take Him literally at His word. This is what He said He did. This is what He did. He created the heavens and the earth. The word was formed without form and void, and there was darkness upon it. He expects us to take His word, these first 5 verses, in a normal, common sense, plain understanding. God did this. When I woke up this morning, I rolled over and checked on Pippa. That's what I did. It's the first thing I did. Okay? Is it pretty plain, right? That's what I did. God says, in the beginning, He created it. Plain and simple. Let's not take it out of context. Let's not read into it any farther. Take Him at His plain, literal word, and then trust what He says that He had done. Trust what He said, what He did, and trust what He revealed to us. Genesis 1 opens without any hint of an alternative to the revealed testimony that God has given us in these first 5 verses. There's nothing in here that tells us any different, that when things first started, God started it. Okay? Now, Why are you spending so much time talking about that? Because those 5 verses have been twisted and changed and turned in a whole variety of ways to fit man's theology and man's ideas to make things more easy for them to believe what they want to believe. If I can take those 5 verses and change them into my truth, then it's not God's truth, and it's wrong, and it causes problems later on. Okay? That's the importance of this. We hear a lot about people talking today about, let me tell my truth. That is a dangerous, dangerous thing. There is no such thing as my truth. There is truth, and then there is things that aren't true. God said He created it. That's the truth. Anybody who says anything different, that is not the truth. And it's wrong, and it causes confusion and a disconnect later on. Okay? So, no hint here of any alternative. God said He did it. That's what He did. Now, He revealed His testimony of His created work, and then God gave this directly to Moses, who wrote this, and how He made the universe. God, in Scriptures, inspired truth of God, tells Moses, in the beginning I created this. Moses writes it down, exactly as God had intended it to be. Jump over with me to Luke chapter 16. And look at verse 31. We may not even get into the first day of creation. So God here condescended to share with Moses how He made the universe. And He said unto him, if they hear not Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded though one rose from the dead. He had a specific way He wanted Moses to write this down in Scriptures. Okay? And He said unto him, if they hear not Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded though one rose from the dead. If we don't take it from the literal sense as the way Moses wrote it down, which God had intended him, if we try to change it in any way, it says then, neither will they be persuaded, neither will they understand, neither will they believe though one rose from the dead. If they don't believe that God created the universe, then they won't believe that Christ raised from the dead. And they won't believe that Christ came and went to the cross for their sins. And they won't believe that what they're doing that is contrary to what God says throughout the rest of the Scriptures is wrong and sinful. And they'll see things in their own truth and make things their own way. Okay? So we see the importance here of taking this in a very, very, very literal concept. Now, try to comprehend eternity past when the Father, Son, and the Spirit commune together without any created object or any created being. Try to conceive in your mind the time before God started creating stuff. That the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit were there, they were in heaven, and there was nothing out there. Can't, right? Our minds, we can kind of maybe have an idea, but we can't fully grasp and understand or comprehend that there was nothing before, there was nothing else here, right? Our mind starts at the beginning. God was here before the beginning. Okay? The human mind cannot comprehend the nature of reality before God began to create. Now, suffice it is to say that His creation of the universe was the beginning of history. Okay? The creation of the universe was the origin of time. The creation of the universe was the origin of space. The creation of the universe was the origin of matter and mass and things that we're able to physically see and comprehend and hold today. Now, on the first day of creation, we see the beginning of the universe. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, the start of human history here. Now, this is where it starts. Okay? In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Now, we see the beginning of the universe here and includes the formless, empty, and still completely pitch dark earth. All right, verse 2. And the earth was without form and void. Darkness was upon the face of the deep. Upon the face of the deep means what? What does deep mean? Deep means way, like the entirety of the earth, right? With that form, it was completely and entirely dark. All of it was dark. There was nothing there. The absence of light completely and entirely. It was entirely dark, okay? And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the water. So the first day of creation, we see the beginning of the universe as we know it. Okay, we also see the history of time, space, and matter. We have the inclusion here of a formless, empty, and still darkened earth. And God was present and active in His creation through the activity of His Spirit. Right, verse 2, in the end of verse 2, and the Spirit of God moved upon the waters. Okay, verse 3, and God said what? Let there be light. Okay? And this is, God said, let there be light, and what happened? There was light. Okay? There's no way to misconstrue that, right? It's pretty straightforward. And God said, let there be light, and then there was light. Okay? Verse 4, and God saw the light, and it was good, and divided the light from the darkness. So, we have this empty, formless, dark earth, the beginning of the universe. God created the light, and when He created the light, He revealed the character of darkness in the beginning, the cycles of morning and evening. So when God said, let there be light, He created the character of darkness. Right? He made the separation of light and dark. Before that, there was no separation. It was just dark. There was nothing there. God said to be light. Now He's changed that in some way. Now there is a presence of light. Therefore, there is an absence of darkness. Okay? So He generated and did all that. God was present and active during this. He then began the cycle of evenings and mornings. Right? He said, verse 4, and God saw the light, that it was good, and that divided the light from the darkness. Let me get to verse 5. And He called the light day. In the darkness He called night. And then we had the separation in the evening and the morning were the first day. So this morning, I don't know, it was about 6 o'clock, I guess it was, 6:15. Sun started peeking out, right? Before that, it was dark, right? Last night, 9:30, 10 o'clock, it gets completely dark. We go through the whole cycle of the night. This morning, about 6:15, whatever it was, we started to see some light coming through the trees, right? And the sun starts to rise. And we know when the sun comes up, we know that we do what? We start a new day, right? When the sun comes up, we start a new day. The sun goes down, we go to bed, we end the day. And that cycle of sun coming up, sun going down, sun coming up, sun coming down, that generates a day. One day. 24 hours when it starts to the whole time it goes through to the end, that's a day. No longer, no shorter, no periods of years and years and years in between. The more sun comes up, the sun comes down. That is one day, 24-hour day. That started with God at creation. The idea, the 24-hour cycle, okay, of our earth rotating on its axis to 24 hours, that gives us the morning and the evening. Okay, now there's a whole science we could talk about how we are angled at 23.5 degrees, the pitch of the earth, the axis that we rotate on, all those things happen, and that's how we have the morning and the evening. Okay, the sun stays in one spot, we rotate, we orbit around the earth, that gives us changing the seasons, we'll get to that later on, but the earth rotating on its axis gives us the morning and the evening. God set that into motion. Okay, and first day He did it. Just morning and evening, and that was the first day. Okay, now the fact that these were normal, literal days is clearly seen from the formula of evening and morning used to define them. Also, the numerical adjectives that are given throughout the rest of this, describing the days, for example, go back to verse 5. And at the end of verse 5, it says that after the evening and the morning, and that was what? The what day? First day. What comes before the first day? Nothing, right? One is always the first one. So this is the very first literal 24-hour day. To say that these days are long ages, to say that the period between the first day and the second day, which is called the gap theory, which we're not going to have time to get into today, we'll get into it next week, that there was millions and millions of years in between day 1 and day 2, which people believe that. There's actually a pretty strong contingency of people who call themselves biblical scholars who believe in the gap theory, that God created day 1, and then there was this huge period of time, and then there was day 2. Okay, and we'll get into that later on. That's a whole other thing. But no, the fact that we have this one consistent day, 24 hours, morning and evening, this was the first day. The fact that they're set up in the way that they're set up, and to say anything contrary to that breaks the consistent, strict rules of grammar. Okay, now I'm not an English person, but I do know that when it says in anything that I'm reading, specifically here in verse 5, that he called the light day, darkness he called night, and the evening and morning, just like we have now. I can look outside, I can visually see evening and morning, right? I can put some verifiable information into evening and morning. I know that I can wake up, and if I stay in the same spot that day, I can witness morning, I can witness evening. I can look at my clock and see how long that takes. Very literal. That's one day. Okay? Saying anything contrary to that breaks the rules of reading stuff or the grammatical structure of how this is written. To say the days are long, also, there is no hint in these verses that long ages of time, long periods of time, either before, during, or between each one of these days. Even if these long ages of time in between these days could be found in the text, the explanation and order of the text would still not be compatible with evolutionary geology. Now, let me go right here for a second, then I'm done. Evolutionary geology states that, boom, something happened. Big Bang. We'll get into that later on. That's starting to fall apart in most scientific communities. It's a whole other lesson we'll get into later. But they say that, boom, Big Bang happened, right? From that point, universe, Edward Hubble telescope, he was the first guy to do this, 1929, that the universe started there and expanded and continued to expand, and then things slowly and gradually kind of started happening, okay? That it took millions. The fact that God said that there was light, there was darkness, there was earth, there was day, it happened in 24 hours, that breaks down the idea that this took millions and millions and millions of years to happen. Guys, I know I've said this before, it takes more faith to believe in something that I have never ever seen and can't comprehend than it does by reading the Word of God and saying, some God that's greater than me, that is stronger than me, that has a greater understanding of things than I do, put this into motion. It takes more faith for me to believe in that this happenstance thing happened, that there's a small amount of antimatter and matter that collided together, and then the universe was nothing, and then it expanded, and it continued to expand and create and go. It takes more faith for me to see that and understand that and try to reason that than to simply say that, you know what? My mind can't comprehend the fact there was a God much greater than anything I can come up with that created the first day. It's so much easier, I think, for me to believe that God said and did what He said He would do. Okay? Now, evolutionary geology includes death taking place and all kinds of other stuff that we're going to get into later on. We haven't got through the first day yet, sorry. But we'll pick this up next week. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the lesson we have here. Thank you for the book of Genesis and the fact that you said you were going to do something and we can read it and we can see it tangibly out in creation of exactly what happened. And we thank you so much for it, Lord. And it's important for us, Lord. And I pray as we go through this that it just renews our, I don't want to say faith, but it renews our eyes, Lord, in looking at just what you were able to do. And that you made it for us, that you had us involved in it, and that you had a plan set up for each and every one of us too. Lord, it blows my little finite, simple mind that you had Lance, a boy from Clinchco that grew up involved and in your mind when you're generating the world that we live in. I pray for Pastor Rob as he comes the next hour as well, that you just use him in a mighty way. Lord, just keep us attentive to the words you have for us too. In your own prayer. Amen.